Ever since the start of the 2000s, the New York Knicks have been one of the worst teams in the league. And before the start of the current season, it didn't look like things were about to change anytime soon. But suddenly, the Knicks have stopped looking like themselves, and there's reason to believe they can be competitive once again. During the first few weeks of the season, they've been playing a solid brand of basketball and have defeated some of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And even while that's not enough to claim their rebuild is complete, the fact they're winning most of their games is already an achievement for them. So, how is it that they've suddenly started playing like a decent team? Have they been going through a lucky stretch, or have they finally found a way to start building a competitive and sustainable culture? Let's find out. It's no secret the Knicks have been almost unwatchable for the better part of the last 2 decades. During the last 20 seasons, they've only made 5 playoff appearances and won a single series while also finishing at or near the bottom of the standings most of the time. But while their performance as a team hasn't been good, the truth is, their problems go way beyond what happens on the court. The team's management over the years has been terrible, and that has turned them into a place where almost no one wants to be. Their decline started when the team was bought by James Dolan by the end of the 90s, and since the start of the new millennium, most managing decisions have harmed the team. From the hiring of inexperienced executives and head coaches to the overpaying of players who were past their prime, the Knicks have made almost all of the ill-advised moves that one could think about. Most of those decisions had reportedly been influenced by Dolan in one way or another, and since he's been explicit about his unwillingness to sell the team, there was no reason to believe New York would start playing well in the short term. Or at least that was the case until the last offseason took place. Coming off their 7th consecutive season without making the playoffs, the Knicks decided to do things differently this time around. Instead of trying to bring familiar or popular pieces to the struggling franchise, the team opted to add people who'd be able to make a good job at each of their respective positions. The first addition was former agent Leon Rose, who had a good reputation within the league ranks and had worked with many star players in the past. He was hired as the team's new president of basketball operations a few weeks before the suspension of last season. That move was followed by the hiring of Tom Thibodeau as the team's new head coach. Just like Rose, Thibodeau is one of the most respected coaches in the league. He became known in the league because of his defensive strategies, which helped the Boston Celtics win a championship in 2008 and turned the Chicago Bulls into a contender in the early 2010s. So, with the new front office and coaching staff in place, New York had the tall task of building a contender from the ground up. And Rose's first test wouldn't take long to arrive as he had to face the shortest offseason in league history. Leon inherited a roster with many flaws that included a lot of players that still had to prove themselves on the court. And to make things worse, they fell in the draft lottery from a projected 6th place to 8. When draft night did come around, the Knicks were lucky enough to have one of the best available prospects fall to their position. So, when it was their turn to make a choice, they didn't think twice and selected New York native and National College Player of the Year, Obi Toppin. But following the draft, most people wondered whether the team would fall back to its old ways of overpaying players and mortgaging the future. Rumors about their interest in players like Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul surrounded the team for months. But in the end, Leon and the front office decided to do what was best for them: nothing. Instead of trying to orchestrate a trade that would land them a star or adding expensive veterans in free agency, the team decided to run things back. Most of the moves they made allowed them to acquire young players or solid and cheap veterans like Nerlens Noel and Austin Rivers. So when the season came around, New York's roster was almost the same as last season. But since last year's team finished with one of the worst records in the league, no one expected the team to leap forward. And after an 0-2 start, it looked like things would remain the same for the Knicks. However, they followed that with a 4-1 stretch in which they managed to get quality wins against teams like the Bucks, Pacers, and Hawks. And impressively, those wins were made possible by a strong defense. In 13 of the last 16 seasons, New York finished in the bottom 10 in defensive rating, so it was common to see them give up a lot of points. But during the first few weeks of the season, they've ranked inside the top 10 in defensive rating. In each of their 4 wins, none of their opponents scored over 110 points. And while a lot of that had to do with rivals missing most of their 3-pointers, Thibodeau's impact can't be discredited. The front court of R.J. Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson has been very efficient on that end of the floor, and though the team must prove it's capable of maintaining that defensive intensity throughout a whole season, we can be sure that Thibodeau will do whatever it takes to keep his players focused on playing strong defense. But the improvements haven't come only on that side of the floor. In fact, one of the most pleasant surprises so far has been the development of some of their players, with Barrett and Randle taking the biggest steps forward. While both players had decent seasons last year, neither was seen as an offensive leader. Instead, there were people disappointed by their play, and especially by Randle, since he was coming off a career year in New Orleans. But Julius was aware of the criticism, and he decided to do something about it. Since the Knicks weren't invited to the Orlando bubble, he used the extra time to work out and improve his physical condition. Rose challenged him to get in the best shape possible so he could assume a larger responsibility when the next season got going, and he decided to accept the challenge to return as a better version of himself. But that's not the only way in which he's changed. Almost all aspects of Randle's game have been better when compared to last season. The forward has been averaging career highs in points, rebounds, and assists per game, while also showing an improved shooting touch. On top of that, he's playing better on the defensive end and has become the team's best playmaker as well. His three-point shooting has been a pleasant surprise, and though his shooting percentages may go down as the season progresses, his improved passing should allow him to remain as a versatile threat and should also make his teammates happier. Last year, some people called him a ball hog, but now he has more than doubled his production when it comes to moving the ball. His assists, secondary assists, and points created off assists per game have all improved, and that's one of the reasons why the Knicks' offense is looking good so far. But he's not the only one that's taken a step forward. Barrett has also improved as a reliable offensive threat, and while his overall production is not as impressive as that of Randall, he's become one of his team's most intriguing players. The duo has been a key factor in the team's success so far, and they've made some history along the way. They became the first pair of Knicks teammates since 1977 to each put up a stat line of at least 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. Randall has also made some history of his own, becoming the first Knicks player to average at least 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists during his first 6 games of the season. But as well as the duo has been playing, the truth is they're not alone. Other players have also been impressive so far. Robinson has also taken a step forward, and though his contribution is not perceived that much on offense, his defensive impact is one of the reasons why the team has been playing better. Most of his stats have seen a small increase, but his biggest improvement has come in the way he reacts to the game. In the past season, he often struggled with fouls, and that forced him to miss important moments in many games. But now the sophomore has become better with using his body. He's learned how he can alter a shot without making a foul, and that's allowed him to stay on the court more often. And last but not least, there's been the play of Rivers and rookie Emmanuel Quickley. The two guards couldn't play together until recently, given that both were dealing with injuries, but as soon as they stepped on the court, they left a good impression on each other, as well as on the rest of the team. Their first appearance together was on the Knicks' last game against Indiana, and though they were only on the floor for a few minutes, each of them was capable of making a solid contribution. The next time around, the duo was making an impact on the team's comeback win against Atlanta. Quickly caused such a good impression on Thibodeau that he played the full fourth quarter, providing a spark that helped his team get the win. Rivers also had his playing time increased, and though his stat line wasn't as impressive, he made a solid contribution on the defensive end. So, suddenly, the Knicks have a problem they didn't know they would have heading into the season: their depth at the point guard position. Aside from Quickley and Rivers, there's Elfrid Payton, who's been starting so far, as well as the injured Dennis Smith Jr. and Frank Ntilikina. And while Rivers will probably keep coming off the bench, there could be a chance Quickley takes over Payton in the starting lineup if he continues to impress everyone. But in any case, that's a good problem to have, and one the Knicks haven't had in a long time. So, in the end, it looks like the Knicks may finally be heading in the right direction. Despite not making any major roster changes during the offseason, the team has managed to start playing better, and that's in large part thanks to Coach Thibodeau. He's been able to help the team establish an identity, and now it may be a matter of time before they start playing to their full potential. And while it may be too early to start celebrating the newfound success, the truth is that this team is looking good enough to make fans in New York feel excited about the future, something that hasn't happened in a long time. But now, do you believe the Knicks will be able to compete for a playoff spot, or will they end up messing things up again by doing a questionable move? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.